Please make very welcome Michelle Priem.
So I'm standing on the boat deck, looking out at the black night. I'm a much younger, 20-something version of myself, and the boat is anchored on the outer parts of the Great Barrier Reef. Now, the outer parts of the Great Barrier Reef are those parts that are so far out to sea that the mainland is no longer visible. So above me is an absolute light show of stars, but out in front is just black. The water is black, and somewhere out into the blackness it becomes the horizon, but there's no idea of telling just where. And as I'm looking out at that view, there's a little voice inside my head that says, "This is beautiful and all, but the best place to be right now is securely here on this well-lit boat." Yet I continue to suit up and gather my dive gear. And I continue to climb down that big boat's ladder into the smaller tender boats, fins in hand, and we're motored a few hundred metres away from the main boat. I'm now completely surrounded by the black. The main boat becomes the only point of reference as to what is the water and what is the sky. Now I silence that inner voice that is saying, "What are you doing?" by saying, "It's okay, I've got a torch and I've got a glow stick." Because in my hand was a C-cell-sized, battery-operated torch that, to be honest, had seen much better days. And on my scuba tank was a freshly cracked red rave-style party glow stick that the divers would use to be able to spot each other under the water. See, with those two things, surely there could not be a problem. And with that thought, I focus on putting on the last of my gear and backflipping over the side of the tender and start to sink into that very dark water. Now there's something about that part of the ocean that is beyond the waves and below the waves that absolutely fascinates some people. And I admit that I am one of those people. There's something about the depth of it, the vastness of it, and the largely uncharted nature of it that just really makes me feel quite small in comparison. Because humans are not designed to breathe underwater. They're just not designed to swim at great depths. And I learned very quickly that the process you need to put your body through to do so is a lot. There are so many things that could go wrong in the process. And not things that could go wrong in the sense that, you might pull a muscle and you might be tired the next day. Things that could go wrong in the sense that, you might actually die. And that must be why, if you learn to scuba dive, they always give you the first lessons in a swimming pool. Because it's only after you've mastered all the risks of the equipment and the process that you can even be ready to comprehend the risks of the actual ocean and all the creatures that live in it. But with that suit and the air tank and the weight belt, we can do it. Our natural instincts to breathe real air and stay afloat can be overruled. And you can sink below the surface level of the ocean just to see what you can see on any given day. Now it sounds completely illogical and it sounds a little bit crazy, but actually doing it is so freaking cool. So on the night I was describing, I was on night 2 of a 5-day liveaboard boat trip to the best spots around the Whitsunday Islands and the Outer Barrier Reef. And on that day, I had completed all my training and had become a qualified open water diver. So I was feeling pretty masterful and pretty proud of myself. So when the dive crew announced that the conditions were just right, that we'd get to do one more dive, only this night time at night, I was all in. Which brings me back to that point of flipping over the side of that tender with nothing but the black on black surroundings, my little torch, my glow stick on my tank, and that voice inside my head that was saying, "What the hell are you doing?" And with all of that, I just started to sink down under the water into a very dark, monochrome world. So as my eyes adjust and the sinking stabilises, I'm suspended there in the water. Now the ocean floor is visible, the sand a few metres down below my feet. There is an enormous reef wall up to my left, and the surface is far, far above. The only sound I can hear is my own breathing that gets translated into a very loud stream of bubbles. I take a moment, take it all in, settle my breathing, when all of a sudden, the sand below my feet is stirred into a cloud, and this massive manta ray emerges from the sand, loops up above the dive group and up towards the surface. Now this ray is not something you'd find in the touch pools and underwater world. This ray would easily be larger than the size of this stage. And being beneath a sea creature of that size, silhouetted by the moon and other surface lights, a good 10 to 12 metres above your head, still remains one of the most magnificent things I have ever seen. It was nothing short of spectacular. And in that moment, I forgot all the risks that were involved, and that voice of caution in my head absolutely went silent. Here I was, outside my comfort zone, and it was absolutely awesome to be here. And with that, I got on with just exploring the reef at night. There is just so much to see on the reef at night that is different to the day. The colours are different, or the lack thereof is there. The number of reef sharks, the rays, and all the fish. There are so many fish. Everything from little tiny fish that are hiding amongst the coral to great big fish that are the length of your arm that are swimming around you. So here I am, swimming along the coral reef with my torch, lighting up all the different things to see what I can see. When suddenly this rush of water goes straight past my face, only centimetres from my cheek. Now, and I'd already seen the giant manta ray, and I'd also seen a number of sharks already that night. You can imagine how that little voice of rational logic inside just absolutely started to scream. And with a flurry of waving arms and a whole lot more bubbles, I regained my composure enough to open my eyes and look. And see, the cause of that torpedo was just another fish. Now this fish would have been the size of about a fat cat. You know, about this big. And as I'm calming myself down and watching this fish to make sure it doesn't swim at me again, I notice that nearly every diver in the group has one of these crafty critters on their back, positioned right behind their glow stick. These fish are waiting silently for their moment to launch forward at phenomenal speed and catch whatever they can see in the torchlight that they'd like to eat that night. And then once they'd caught it, they'd circle back around, back onto the diver's tank, and wait for the next strike. See, these fish were so used to us coming to their reef, and clearly they were far more intelligent than the average fish is given credit for, that they were using us divers as hunting aids to find their midnight snacks. Now, me and my dive buddy used this to our advantage for a bit, helping the fish find their food, but also laughing at the confusion that was created when you move your torch beam just at the last second, and the fish will follow the torchlight and miss its target. It was just fun, and it was playful. And it definitely gave that bluefin trevally fish, which I later found out it was called, the title of being the craftiest fish on the reef, or at least in my story anyway. So what has begun as a terrifying and exhilarating challenge had become relaxed and playful. Now, as we surfaced that night and we were towed back to the main boat, back through that blackness and darkness I described, I remember this feeling of absolute pure joy. Proud of myself that I'd been brave enough to jump into the blackness. Grateful for that little voice inside my head, but also for that power to override it. And happy to have had this experience that ranged from everything from terror to absolute awe to just pure fun. Now, that night dive was now over 18 years ago. Yet I can tell you I remember every sight and every feeling of the experience so clearly. It's a powerful experience to push yourself but still find space to play. To be able to listen to that inner voice but know when it's okay to also overrule it. For there are opportunities to step outside our comfort zone all around. And you never know what just might lie ahead if you can leap in and wait and see what happens after you begin to sink.